10 seconds after checking the phone, the hand goes back. The screen wakes up with the confidence of a scheduled inspection. There is no notification, no message, no tiny digital emergency waiting politely behind the glass. And still, for about half a second, the check feels reasonable. That is the strange part. The person is not exactly looking for something, but the brain has already filed a request. The phone has become the object you consult before you know what question you are asking. Maybe something changed. Maybe nothing changed. But apparently, this requires immediate review. The important move is smaller than scrolling. It is the wake, the glance, the pull down, the one app opened with the legal defense of just checking. Sometimes that is the whole visit. In one 2-week logging study, more than half of phone uses lasted under 30 seconds, which is barely enough time to regret unlocking it properly. But those tiny visits still matter because they are the doorway. A check can end with nothing, or it can become a message, a feed, a search, a video, and suddenly the original mission has left the building. So this is not the story of falling into the internet for an hour. It is the stranger story of why the brain keeps walking up to the door. The door is easy to reach, which is already half the problem. A phone check is a repeated inspection of something that might have changed while you were busy existing. That is an extremely unfair setup for a brain. The cost is tiny. Lift the hand, wake the screen, look for 1 second, pretend this was a strategic operation. And sometimes it pays. A message appears, a reply lands, a small update exists, or the screen produces just enough novelty to make the next inspection feel reasonable. The habit does not need a prize every time. It only needs enough past little wins for the next reach to feel cheap. That sounds like the answer, except it still makes the check seem more purposeful than it often is. The empty screen should end the story. You checked, nothing changed, case closed, tiny courtroom dismissed, but the brain can treat that nothing as an answer. Before the check, there was a small open slot, maybe a message, maybe a reply, maybe some invisible update. After the check, the slot collapses into something boring but useful. Nothing happened. That is not a big reward, obviously. No one is framing an empty lock screen and putting it above the fireplace, but it can still shrink the maybe for half a second. So the phone is not only a reward machine, it is a possibility machine, and the possible reward starts doing some of the work. Possibility gets stronger when the phone has a history of interrupting. Every ping is a tiny lesson. Something can arrive without asking your schedule for permission. Even when the phone is ignored, the interruption still has to be processed by the mind. A sound happens, attention flinches, and some part of the brain briefly opens the inbox-shaped window. Very professional. Terrible for focus. Over time, the phone does not only train response, it trains expectation. And once expectation is trained, silence can start to feel less like peace and more like unfinished business. But that leaves the stranger case, the check that happens with no ping, no buzz, and no outside signal at all. No ping makes the check more revealing, because now the phone did not interrupt the person, the moment did. A blank pause opens, or fatigue drifts in, or boredom starts moving the furniture around in the brain. Stress can do it too. Loneliness can do it. Even a tiny stretch of now what can become suspiciously uncomfortable, and the phone is right there, offering the world's fastest emotional side quest. It might not fix the mood, but it changes the room for a second. That is why the question starts to move away from the screen. Maybe the person is not checking what is on the phone. Maybe they are checking what life feels like without it. The phone stops looking like a mailbox and starts looking like a button for escaping the exact second before the hand moved. Once the phone becomes a mood button, the next layer is harder to avoid, because the phone does not just contain information. It contains people, or at least the possibility of people, which is somehow more annoying. A reply might have landed. Someone might have noticed. A plan might have moved without you. A tiny piece of social weather might have changed. That is the useful version of fear of missing out. Not a dramatic internet illness, but the suspicion that rewarding things may be happening somewhere else. The screen can be boring and still feel loaded, because the boring screen is sitting in front of a very active imaginary room. Maybe nobody said anything, but checking proves it for a second. And that proof can feel strangely important when belonging is one of the things being quietly measured. At this point, it would be easy to make the phone the villain. Very neat, very satisfying. Also, not quite true. A phone can be a map, a tool, a ride home, a work message, a friend, a safety line, or the fastest way to answer one practical question before life becomes a small paperwork accident. The problem is not that the rectangle exists. The sharper line is whether the check was chosen or whether every tiny gap started automatically requesting a screen. A useful message at the right time is not the same thing as opening the phone because the room had a 3-second silence in it. The person is not stupid. The system is just sitting nearby, unlocked by a thumb, and offering several possible exits at once. Now the reach makes more sense. One tiny motion can point at 5 different promises, which is extremely efficient and mildly unfair. Maybe there is information. Maybe there is relief. Maybe there is a person. Maybe there is novelty. Maybe there is a way out of the current second. The brain does not have to pick one before the hand moves. It can reach first and let the screen explain the mission afterward. That is why the check can feel reasonable before it has a reason. Basically, it is a tiny menu where every option says check and see, with almost no cost at the door. And when a machine has been that useful, that close, and that easy, the brain starts asking it questions early, sometimes before the person has even noticed the question forming. So we are back where the story started. Same person, same phone, same blank screen, now behaving less like a joke and more like a very small inspection stamp. Nothing arrived, but the check still answered something. The world behind the glass did not update while the moment was empty. That does not make the habit good or bad by itself. It just makes it understandable, which is annoyingly less dramatic. The phone is not always being opened for a message. Sometimes it is being opened for certainty. A tiny proof that the pause can stay a pause, and nothing terrible has been missed.